All right, so I'm here with my dude, Michael Elsner. He is the founder of Master Music Licensing. He's awesome. Last time I talked to him, he had short hair. Now he has long hair. It's luxurious. And Michael, he's gotten over 2,000 placements of his original music onto TV shows, film trailers, commercials, personally. He's gotten placed on Fox Sports, ABC, tons of TV shows. I was like looking through his credits, and to list all of them would be insane. So you can go like Google it if you want to check it out. But some of my favorites are like Impractical Jokers. My wife's a huge Hannah Montana fan, so like that would make her really excited. Just like so many other TV shows, and has this huge core experience of getting his music licensed on TV, film, commercials. And so today he's going to share some of his lessons that he's learned over years and years of learning that. So Michael, thanks for taking the time to be here today.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I always enjoy talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know like we've already met before, so you've already introduced yourself, but for anyone who's watching this right now who has never met you before, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story and kind of how you got started with music licensing.
Yeah. So the short of it is, I grew up in upstate New York and played in bands up there. Left New York came to Nashville in '98. I left New York in '97. I spent a year in Orlando. Then I came to Nashville in '98. And I came, to Nashville, searching for, obviously, trying to get a publishing deal. That was the first goal, right? I wanted to be a successful songwriter, and wanted to. Of course, I've always been a band guy, so I wanted to, put together a band and go out on the road and have success. All the dreams that we have growing up about, rock stardom and whatnot. So came to Nashville and spent 4.5 years in Nashville from '98 to summer of 2003. I came here in the end of '98 and got turned down by, every publisher you can imagine. And so I didn't have success with my songs, even though I was consistently writing music. I wasn't having success with my songs getting picked up, which was really frustrating. But I was having success as, I started playing guitar on projects and started producing records. Learned engineering. I worked as an assistant engineer under a bunch of other guys. And so I was always in the studio environment, learning all the production aspects of it and, getting my skills locked in as a guitar player and whatnot. But after, 4.5 years of getting turned down by everyone, I thought, I got to do something else. So in the summer of 2003, I moved out to Los Angeles. And when I got there, same exact goals. I wanted to, get a publishing deal. I wanted to put together a band and have success with a band. Ideally, even if I couldn't put together a band, at least get a road gig playing for an artist, playing guitar and whatnot. So I moved to Los Angeles in summer of 2003, and I didn't know anyone when I moved there. By the way, I didn't know anyone when I moved to Nashville either. So when I moved to LA, I had one buddy out there who I just crashed on the corner of his bedroom, and I was planning on being out there for about 6 weeks. I said, I'll give LA a shot for 6 weeks. And within that time, I ended up landing a gig on playing guitar on a TV show for a composer. And so I go up to a studio up in Malibu, and that was just a chance meeting at a Starbucks, by the way. I'd go up to a studio a couple times a week and up in Malibu, and I'd sit and I'd watch him compose to the show. And then I'd, play the parts he wanted me to play. And so that was a complete mind-blowing experience, because I came from record world where we're making records and you'd spend, 3 or 4 days just on one song. And here they're doing, 12 or 13, cues or pieces of music for a scene, in a day, writing, tracking, recording, and sending it back out. And it just amazed me how fast that world worked. And then through that, I started meeting some people called music supervisors, which everyone knows who they are now. But at the time, 2003, I had no idea what these people did. The industry hadn't changed so much that people were after music supervisors yet, So I met some music supervisors, and then, one time I just asked to one, I said, hey, can I give you a CD of some songs, after I kind of knew what they did? And she said, sure. And I gave her a CD of some of my songs that I'd written, during my Nashville years. And within 2 weeks, I had my first placement. It was a featured song. They played it for like 2 minutes and like 22 seconds or 2 minutes and 23 seconds or something like that. Featured vocal song on a popular show at the time called Cold Case, which was on CBS. And I made more money just on the upfront fee than I made in a couple months living in Nashville producing, the last couple of, years that I was in Nashville just producing records. It was unbelievable, the difference. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. So I, started, piqued my curiosity, and I started, sending out some more CDs to a couple of supervisors who I'd met. And within the first year and a half that I lived in Los Angeles, I had my entire song catalog from my 4.5 years in Nashville that got turned down by everyone, placed on all these shows. And you mentioned Hannah Montana earlier about your wife. The track that I got on Hannah Montana was a song that I had written in Nashville and gotten turned down. And that song was also used on High School Musical, by the way. And then the song that got placed on Cold Case, which I was really proud of that song, that got turned down by every publisher in Nashville. And then that song's been placed a boatload as well. So so that was my introduction to music licensing. And I thought, this is amazing. I get turned down by everyone in the music industry, and in the licensing world. They're so happy and thankful and grateful for my songs, and then they're utilizing them, and then they're making, getting them placed on shows, and I'm getting paid for them, and then I'm getting royalties. And I was like, this is amazing. So yeah, that's my short story of how I got into it.
Sweet, dude. So it sounds like what you're saying is, and I've heard this before too, that you might have been the one who told me this, that, music licensing, it's really about the film industry. It's really about TV and that industry, as opposed to like the music industry. And it's a very important part of that industry. But because of that, there's a lot of abundance. And in terms of like you said, the one placement that you got was more than you had gotten over, 5 times as long in the music industry. Yeah. So it sounds like this is a potential opportunity for musicians to have a supplemental income stream in addition to, their original music that they're probably passionate about, because, they're musicians and they have original music, just like you. But it's maybe something that, if they haven't explored yet, is like a huge opportunity to, have an extra stream of income, to get more exposure, get on these TV shows, have credibility, that even if they have been turned down and by publishers and by people in the record label industry, there's still a place where it can be really valuable.
Oh, sure. And the thing is, like I'm very passionate about the music that I write anyway. I don't sit and write songs for, I don't write songs for briefs. Now, there are 2 paths that people go down in the licensing world, right? There are people who want a brief. A brief is basically like a request. So if there's a particular show, say a music supervisor is working on a show, and they need a song that is, like, I don't know, I'm just going to pick something off the top of my head, 70s era, throwback to Aerosmith, like a Walk This Way kind of thing, I'm just making that up off the top of my head because I got an Aerosmith album on the back wall. But if that would be a brief. Okay. And then some people will be like, oh, okay, well, now I have like, a couple hours or a day to write a song in the style of 70s, Aerosmith, AKA like Walk This Way-ish, some people do that, and that's awesome. That's not the path that I go down. So the path that I have chosen in my licensing career is I'm a big advocate of just writing the music that you're passionate about to start with. I don't want to always be chasing something. So for me, I like to come into my studio and I like to just write whatever I want to write. I think that's the way that most musicians want to approach their career anyway. So if I want to come in here and I just want to write like a pop track, and then I'm going to write a pop track. And if I want to invite some friends over and write, I mean, maybe even like I live in Nashville again, so like a country-ish track, which is really just 70s rock, repurposed, then we can write that. And so for me, I like to just write the music because there will always be an outlet for it. Other people are adamant about being like, hey, listen, you should always follow the briefs and write what the briefs are requesting. And that's just not what I'm passionate about doing. I don't want to sit and be like, okay, what do I have to write today? That to me is more like a job. I want to write the music that I just feel like writing. If I want to come into my studio tomorrow and I want to write a symphonic epic trailer piece, then that's what I'm going to do. And if I want to take the day off the next day, then that's what I'm going to do. So that's the path that I have chosen to go down in my career. And that's the path that I, really kind of advocate for other musicians is, licensing your music doesn't mean that you have to give up any other pursuit. It's just another outlet for your music, just like radio, right? If you write a song that you're passionate about and you want to get it on the radio, then you go down the channels that you need to go down to in order to get it, on a radio station and on radio stations all throughout the world. So it's the same thing with licensing. It's just the difference is that the end users who use your music in the licensing world do not follow the same rules that we're used to when it comes to promoting our music in what I call the traditional music industry, right? So when we write a song in the traditional music industry pursuit, and we want to get it to a publisher or a radio person or even fans, we follow a certain, set of rules to get there, right? Because they absorb and utilize music in a specific way. In the licensing world, it's completely different because when you're licensing your song to a TV show, the people who are working on that TV show don't work in the music industry. They work in the TV industry. If you're licensing your music for a commercial, the people who are working in that world work in the ads and promos industry. They don't work in the music industry, etc. As we go down into film and video games and all that kind of stuff. So we have to understand that our end users are absorbing and utilizing music completely different in those industries than they do in the music industry, which means that our path to get it to them and the process to get it to them is completely different. And I feel like that's the biggest hurdle that the musicians that I speak to and share this with have to overcome. They still approach them, the end users in the licensing industry, the same way they approach like a radio station or possibly a manager or a publisher or sending their music to a record label. And then they wonder why they haven't had any success. Oh, sync licensing sucks. I sent out my music and no one's calling me back. Yeah, because you delivered your music to them the absolute wrong way. They can't utilize it the way that you delivered it to them. And a great analogy would be this. We're all used to, every single one of us who's watching this right now is used to getting in a car and, and commuting to and from work or to the grocery store or to church or whatever, right? And so if we're driving to and from those places that we're used to going all the time, we're used to driving a car that we bought at the, dealership for anywhere between, maybe 15 miles an hour in a school zone and 70 or 75 miles an miles an hour if you're on the highway, or maybe even 80 if you got a radar detector or something like that. And that's what we're used to, right? But if we wanted to then compete in the world of NASCAR, okay, we can't show up to the racetrack with a 2019 Hyundai Sonata, right? Because we're racing against these cars that are specifically built to go 200 miles an hour. And our car, we're going to tootle around the track at like 80, 85, and they're going to lap us every time, So when we look at that scenario, just imagine that, you kind of laugh, but you think like that guy's going to get destroyed. He shows up at a NASCAR event in a Hyundai Sonata, he's going to get destroyed. That's the same thing as following the exact same path that we're used to with the traditional music path and sending our music out to those end users in the licensing arena. That's the reason why you're not going to have success. Can that person who's in the Sonata on the NASCAR, can he have success? Yes, he can have success maybe once, maybe twice in his entire career, assuming the fact that while he's on one side of the track and everyone else is on the other because they're going so fast, the first two cars wreck and they create a pile up and he's able to finally go and tootle around them and navigate around them and complete the race because he's the only car left standing and win. That's the reason why people who have success maybe one or two times licensing their music can't do it repeatedly because they literally just had luck, and so the biggest thing with musicians when it comes to licensing is learning that this is a completely different world that follows a completely different set of rules, and you have to deliver your music in such a way that satisfies those rules, and those rules are completely different than sending your music out to a radio station, sending your music out to a publisher, etc.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm a sucker for analogies, so I love the race car analogy, and and so to pile another analogy in the mix, I've heard this might have been from Chris SD, who is also going to be on the summit.
He's awesome.
He is awesome, and I know you two just like collaborated on something and did like an amazing thing that worked together. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
But I think it was either from him or for someone else was talking about this idea of it's just a different language, right? So it's like you have to learn how to speak the language of supervisors and learn how to communicate with them in the way and use the words and use the different ways that they know how to communicate. Right. And I don't know if you ever heard I don't know if it's like a parable or a story of like the blind monks who they're feeling an elephant, and each of them is feeling a different part of the elephant, and it's all an elephant,
Yeah,
but one of them's like, the elephant's like a tree trunk because it's like feeling the leg.
sure.
Another one's feeling like the tail, and it's like, no, the elephant is like this, and so they
Yeah,
all have, it's the same elephant, but it's all just like a different way of a different point that you're
sure.
connecting to. So it sounds like what you're saying is that that's really kind of how it works in terms of this specific industry, is that it's the
Yeah,
same songs, and you can even you can do what you're passionate about and actually just write. You could write for briefs, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that,
no,
but
no.
if you're really passionate about your original music and you wanted to show up and you don't want it to feel like a job, you just want to create music, then you can do that. And then it's just about taking what you already have and figuring out how to communicate it and put it in front of the right people who can get the most value out of it, and
Yeah,
to communicate it in a way that they understand so that they want to use it.
right. You're 100% right. One of my very good friends, who's actually a business partner of mine, a co-writer of mine, he loves writing for briefs. He loves that challenge, and that's just one of those things that I particularly don't. But he's an incredible musician, and his stuff is amazing. He's an incredible guy. But just our backgrounds and everything about us is different. We get along, work together great, but just our pursuits and our desires and all that stuff are just different. And so it's just one of those things where I don't particularly like that. I think that's more chasing something, and that's just, to me, not enticing to me. He loves it because he likes that challenge. For me, I like to come in and kind of just do my own thing, and get into my own world. And I like to create something without any rules or boundaries. Other people love having the rules and the boundaries and the parameters that they have to work within. And it just kind of boils down, I think, a lot of times to personality. I'm very much a rule breaker. I've always been. And so that's just, I think it's probably just always been the long-haired rock and roll guitar player side of me, that I like to just do my thing. Other people tend to be very much like, these are the rules, these are the parameters, and we stay in the lines. And that's fine. I tend to be one of those people where I don't like that. I like to see how far I can take things. And, not every piece of music that I write is going to be licensed, or am I actually even going to finish? Sometimes I go down a path and I'm like, man, this is just getting too far out there. Yeah, let's too many odd time signatures. This was fun, but let's just call it what it is. But I enjoy that, because to me, success to me isn't just having a song placed on a TV show. A big part of success to me is just being able to do what you want to do, that's personally fulfilling, and that you're proud of, for a living. But other people have different, I guess, indicators of success. So, there's no one path to get there. However, you do have to understand the rules of the game that you're playing. And the licensing world has its own set of rules. And they are completely different, for the most part, than the music industry path. And that's the reason why so many musicians who just go, well, I'm going to start licensing my music, so I'm going to blast all these music supervisors with my album, and we're going to send my album to all these people. That's awesome. It's easy to do that. And since you like analogies, I'm going to make one up right now. It's easy to find supervisors. It's easy to find people who work in the licensing world. Google's your friend. You can find any of this stuff on Google, right, in under a couple minutes. But that's like going out on the weekend and driving around some neighborhoods and looking for a party. Maybe on like a Sunday, during football season, going and seeing, where all the cars are parked in front of someone's house, and going, oh, that person's probably having a party. That's like finding a supervisor. It's not that hard. Okay. The next thing that people do then is they just reach out and they start sending out their music. That's like getting out of your car and walking up to the door of that house and knocking on the door and being like, hey man, I see you're having a party. Can I come in? Well, no one knows who you are. You're the weird guy that just showed up with nothing to this party, and you don't even know what the party is. So most of the time, people aren't going to allow you in. So that's the reason why people don't have success. But the process that I show people, and the whole, why I do master music licensing, is think of it like this. If you're having a Super Bowl party or a football party, you got a bunch of your buddies over, your friends over, and someone shows up to your door, they knock on your door, you open it up, you don't know who it is, but it's some guy holding a big platter of spare ribs and yeah, and chicken wings that they grilled out and already did, and then maybe like a bunch of, you know, fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. Like, hey, I'm your neighbor down the road. I saw you're having a party and figured maybe I'd, you know, see if I could come and hang, and you bring in all this stuff. Yeah, most people are gonna be like, hey guys, look what the neighbor guy brought. Everyone's gonna be like, neighbor guy, right? Neighbor guy's gonna be invited in because you showed up with something. You showed up with something of value that allowed you to walk through the door. Anyone can go and knock, right? But now you've been invited in because you showed up with all this value. And that's the problem when people just send out their music. They're sending out their music in a way that's just like knocking on the door, and someone opens up and goes, oh, it's just another CD. I can't use this. Doesn't have any of the information on it that I need. I don't know anything about this. I have no idea who even owns the masters and the publishing and all this other stuff. All this stuff that's involved. How do I describe the songs? Is there metadata? All that other stuff. What else is coming with it? Is it coming with, you know, stems? Do I get alternate mixes? You know, all the things that editors and re-recording mixers, the people further down the line will need. And when you don't show up to that, you're just blasting people, they're going to close the door. But when you show up with all the stuff, all the goodness, that big platter of you know, fruits and vegetables and meat for everyone at the party to eat, then yeah, they're going to welcome you in with open arms and be like, the neighbor guys brought all the cool stuff. So there's an analogy for you on licensing and showing up to the party with actual value.
Sorry, I just had a victory playing for that analogy. That's a great analogy. I might steal that from you at some point. It's so relevant to like just like building relationships in general. And yeah, like you said, one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of artists make is just throwing their music out there, spamming people as much as possible. And it's just, it's knocking on the door of a party without having anything, you know, of like not focusing on them and building a real relationship, building a connection.
I mean, you don't even know what the party is. You're just knocking on the door and someone opens up. It's like a crocheting party. And you're like, what the heck? You know, I mean, you gotta know what's going on here. And, you know, so, again, it's just different rules. If I could say that there's one thing that the biggest mistake that people make, that musicians make when it comes to the licensing world is they don't understand the business that they're getting into. They don't understand the fact that they're actually getting into a completely different industry. It's just like that guy showing up at the racetrack with a stock Hyundai Sonata from the Hyundai dealership, racing against these customized cars with pit crews and all that other stuff. You know that person's going to get annihilated. Right? They just don't know the game that they're showing up to. They're going to get laughed off the track. It's the same thing.
Beautiful. So yeah, I'd love, I know you have like, we could probably spend 300 hours kind of going through everything, but I know you do have kind of like a framework that allows artists, that kind of gives them the language, helps them to actually present their music in the right way and to make a game plan for them to build those relationships with the party owners before they kind of just show up, and figuring out how to do that. So I'd love to maybe just zoom out a little bit and look at what are like the big steps, and what do people that are watching this right now, let's say that I'm an artist and I have an EP or I have an album of songs that I feel really proud of. How do they kind of get started along this route of getting it licensed to TV and film?
So that's great. So it's going to start just like when you're finishing a record and you're going to go, you know, generally speaking, in the professional world, when people finish an album, the mix engineer will mix multiple versions of a song, right? Now we're all very much aware of like, okay, a master and an instrumental, right? But the reality is that when you're a professional level musician and you're with a record label and you're really making a record, the mix engineer is going to mix out a lot of different versions of your song. He'll mix out, you know, the standard mix with like a vocal up, call it like a vocal up 1 dB, vocal up 2, maybe a vocal down, you know, just these slight little tweaks, because that's what the mastering engineer is going to, you know, when the mastering engineer sits and sequences everything and masters all the songs together, you know, they're going to try the different ones and see which one ultimately, you know, sounds best in the actual flow of the record, right? So really in the professional world, when a professional artist is mixing out their albums, they're mixing more than just a full mix and an instrumental mix, right? Mm-hmm. So if we take that over into the licensing world, It's going to be very similar. You're going to start by always having your full mix. You don't have to do all the craziness of the vocals ups and downs and all that kind of stuff, because that brings in a whole mastering issue. But you're going to do your full mix. You're going to do your instrumental mix, right? But you're also going to want to provide your end users with multiple other options. So that'd be the first thing I would tell you to do. I would tell you to, at the very least, always have an instrumental mix. You have to. But if you have the ability to sit with your mix engineer, I would have them burn out multiple other versions for you. Simple ones would be even like an acoustic version. If the song started with just acoustic guitar and vocals, then you start adding all the other layers in the in the recording. Strip all those layers off, so it's just back to the acoustic vocal. You could do like a stripped down version. You could alternate some levels. If you have some heavy guitars and some we'll say like EDM keyboards, you could maybe change the levels on that mix, and you have you go from your rock mix to like an EDM mix. A lot of times when you're sitting in the mix process as a mix engineer is putting stuff together, you start hearing all these other things like, oh, that'd be really cool. Maybe even just the bass and the drums are creating a really cool groove. That could be its own mix, a bass and drum mix. And when you start really listening to TV, this is the first thing I always encourage everyone to do, is just start listening to TV. When you start really listening to TV, you start hearing all these other musical elements. You'll be watching a TV show and you might just hear a section where it's just bass and drums. Well, if you have bass and drums on all of your songs, why don't you create a bass and drum mix? Because now you have another opportunity for that placement. Creating stem mixes. Stem mixes are the instrument groups, stereo mixes of instrument groups. So you have a drum stem, bass stem, a guitar stem, vocal stem, a keyboard stem, maybe an orchestra stem. And the reason why having these elements is important is because you're always going to be playing along with dialogue and sound design. Sound design is all the other sounds that are being used in a TV show. For example, like birds chirping, the sound of the car driving down the street, the sound of the mailbox closing if you're getting the mail, right? All those things, footsteps on a wood floor and stuff like that. There's all these other sounds that are mixed in to the recording to make it sound very real and to draw you in, right? So that's called sound design. And when you get further down the chain to the final person in the process, who's called a re-recording mixer, that person mixes all the dialogue from all the actors, all the sound design, all this, just the various effects, sometimes also known as Foley, F-O-L-E-Y, and then of course the music, right? And what you'll notice is the music is underneath all that stuff. It needs to make room for all the other stuff, all the footprints and all footsteps and all that stuff. So in certain scenes, you might hear something that's just an acoustic guitar and a vocal, because there's dialogue over it. And then right when that dialogue ends, it might crossfade into the full version. And when you really listen, you're like, oh wow, that was amazing how they wrote that piece like that. Well, it's not necessarily how they wrote that piece like that. It's how the editor took these multiple alternate mixes, maybe just that acoustic mix, up until that moment. And at that moment, then he crossfaded into the full mix. And it sounds like it was intended. It sounds natural. But these are the people further down the line utilizing your music in the ways that are that complement the scene, right? As far as stems go, why do you deliver stems? Well, because in the music space, we mix in stereo, right? We have a left and a right speaker. But in the TV world, everything's surround sound. It's 5.1, it's 7.1, right? So there's sounds going all around you. And that's what the re-recording mixer's job is. His job is to put all that stuff around you. When you go to the movie, that's how you hear all that, stuff going sideways and forward and backward and all that stuff. And there are times where they want that. They want that freedom to be able to go, well, in this space, I want to put the drums up here. I want to put the bass and the guitars over here. And I kind of want to get that vocal back here. Well, if you're only handing them a stereo mix, they can't do that. And you're competing with professionals. It's a professional business, right? And the professionals are delivering music to the end users the way the end users need it and want it. So if you want to play the game with the professionals, you got to play the game like the professionals do. And so it would start by having these types of mixes available. Now, if you can't go farther back into your catalog, you only have a full mix and an instrumental mix, that's okay. You can definitely start there. But moving forward, as you continue moving forward in your music career and with your songs, you should always be aware of these other mixes and having them, created for you by your mix engineer, or if you're mixing your stuff, then you create them so that you can provide them to the editors and the supervisors and the re-recording mixers who are going to be utilizing your music in the licensing world. So I would start there.
Beautiful. Okay, so basically, as a recap, the music engineers that are kind of the final touch on how music gets placed into TV and film, a lot of times they need to adapt the music. Like, it doesn't fit perfectly the way that they would want it to. And so in order to adapt, they need to have, or at least ideally, you can provide them with the stems, because in the stems are basically like groups of each of the instrument types. So like guitars and vocals. And so that makes it really easy for them to mix it together and to kind of lower the volume on the guitars and whatever, and kind of mix it together.
Yeah.
And that's really important because that kind of gives them the flexibility to be able to adapt it to fit the placement that they're trying to put it on. And so that's one way that people can really, can compete with professionals, is by actually being able to provide all of those stems.
Yeah. And keep in mind that professionals are not some, weird group of people just, living out in LA who are just writing music for TV. Professionals are people who could be living right down the street from you, who are, a lot of people I know who write music and are very successful writing music for TV don't live in Los Angeles anymore. And one of my good friends is a very, very, very successful composer, works on TV shows all the time. He doesn't live in LA anymore. So you don't have to live there. Anyone watching anyone watching this interview right now could be a professional, musician who's writing music for TV shows. As far as being professional, all you're doing is you're delivering music the same. You just understand the business. That's the biggest thing. How do you become a professional in this side of the business? By understanding the business. And when you start just showing up to that party, with the platter, you're showing up to the end users. You're presenting your music to the end users in a way that allows them to utilize it best. And it's really not difficult. It's just having a slight mindset shift of how you're going to approach everything, right? You can still continue the music industry pursuit and pursue your artist career and building fans and all that stuff. You can absolutely do that. But you just have to adapt a little bit when you're approaching this industry here. So it's anyone can be a professional in it. You just have to learn how the business works.
I love it. And I love how complementary it is to everything else that you're trying to do. If you are, trying to build your artist career and you're trying to build a fan base and tour, you're creating music anyways. And so it doesn't take very much effort to talk to your producer and say, or your mixing engineer and say, hey, would it be possible to get just the stems bounced out on these songs? And literally what took 5-10 seconds gives you this huge amount of, adaptability. So, another question for you is, for someone who hasn't built a lot of relationships yet with music supervisors, and they're kind of like, those parties sound pretty cool. These sound like some pretty cool parties. I want to go check them out, but I don't want to be that weird guy who just shows up. How do they start? So they can Google, they can kind of find these people. How do they start thinking about reaching out to people, and how do you do it in a way that isn't weird and that helps you build a relationship with them?
Sure. So, when I started, I administered my catalog fully on my own. And what that means is I would send CDs. This is back, when I was sending out CDs still. I would send CDs every time I finished a new batch of songs, maybe 10 songs at a time. I would put them on a CD. It's actually 9 songs. I did 9 songs. And the reason why is because at the time when I was still sending out CDs, when I was starting, you could fit 19 songs on a CD. You couldn't fit 20, right? But you could fit 19. And I'd always send the master and the instrumental. So that gave me 18, you can't divide 19 by 2 evenly. So I would go to 18 and divide it by 2. So you had 9 songs. I had nine masters, 9 instrumentals, all right? So that's how I approached it initially. And I would send those CDs out to supervisors. And then I would, I'd be out somewhere, maybe getting some dinner with a friend, and I'd get a phone call that they want to license one of my songs, and I'd have to quickly pack up my stuff and get in my car and, leave dinner early and go back home into my house or my studio or wherever my computer was at the time and get them the files that they needed and sent out, and then, print out the PDF that they would send me and sign that and then scan it and send it back. And there's a lot that goes into administering your catalog. And a lot of it is, the licensing world works very quickly. Deadlines, if someone needs to license a song, a lot of times you'll see in a brief that you usually have, most of the time, 24 hours, 36 hours maybe at the most. But this is for like a custom type of piece. When it comes to just licensing a track, that is generally taken care of very quickly, usually within less than a day. So you have to really ask yourself, are you going to be able to do that? Are you going to be able to be checking your email often? Are you going to be able to respond to stuff quickly? If you're working a 9-to-5 job and you get a call at 11 o'clock in the morning, someone wants to license your song, but they need it by, all the stems and all that stuff by 4:30, are you going to be able to leave your job, go home, get all that stuff packaged up, sign the deal and send it back in time? These are questions that you really have to ask yourself. For me, I chose about 9 years ago now, 10 years ago now, that I was done doing that. It was just too much. It got to be too much to administer my catalog every day. So what I did is I started having someone else take over. And before we get into that, just a little backstory is, like I said earlier, my whole goal was I always wanted to have a publishing deal, right? I felt like that meant a lot. When you have a whole team of people marketing your music and pitching your music, that was, a big indicator for success. So for me, that was a bit of a barometer that I wanted to reach in my career for success. And I think if you're watching this interview and it doesn't matter if you're sitting in a coffee shop with people around, but if at some point you've wanted to have a publisher and getting a publisher was a goal of yours, just raise your hand, just admit it, right? I think most musicians want to have a publisher. And in the licensing world, a publisher isn't called a publisher, it's called a library. They're the exact same thing, but it just has to do with the history of the TV and the sync world. They're called libraries. So it's interesting now. I'll say something about a library to musicians. They're like, oh, I don't want to give up any of my publishing. I don't want to sign any of my publishing over. But then in the next sentence, they'll talk about how they want a publishing deal. So it starts again, kind of going back to just understanding the business. And in the licensing world, library is a publisher. And actually, you have a lot more freedom with a library, being signed to a library, than you do in the traditional world, being signed to a publisher. So to answer your question about how to go about this, I'm a big advocate now of working with a library for a number of reasons. When I signed my catalog over to a library, I started having a lot more success with my placements. To give you an example of that, I moved to Nashville a number of years ago. When I moved to Nashville, I had over 750 placements. I now have around over 2,300. So I've tripled that in a fairly short amount of time. Having a library, which basically means having a whole team promote my songs constantly. So right now, as you and I are talking, there could very well be a license happening, right? That I'm unaware of. I'll get paid for it and all that stuff, which will be great. But I don't have to sit here and stop my conversation with you and get on the phone and be like, hey, Michael, I'll be back. I got to go print something out quickly. And then I got to go find my stems and I got to send it all off and this and that. So that's why I'm a big advocate of working with libraries. I know a lot of musicians want to deal with supervisors. But the reality is, again, if you don't know the business, which a lot of musicians just don't understand the business, a supervisor is not going to want to work with you. I know that, Chris SD says the same thing. It's definitely true. Supervisors don't want to be teaching amateur musicians how to license their music. And so they want to work with people who are either administrators or libraries, people who do this every day. So it starts by understanding that a library in the licensing world is a publisher. You get more freedom working with a library because you are only bound to that library by the songs that you write for them. So for example, let's say I write 10 songs and I want to have one library represent 3 of them, another library represent 3 of them, and another library represent 4 of them. I could do that. In the traditional music industry path, if I write 10 songs and I'm signed with a publisher, that publisher owns all 10 songs. In fact, generally speaking, that publisher will own everything that I write during the term of my contract, right? So if I write 100 songs during the 2 years that I'm under my deal with that particular publisher, they would own all of those songs. In the licensing world, it's not the case. I own everything that I write until I sign those songs over to the library, and I can sign those songs over to any library as I choose. And in my business, I have 3 outlets. I call them buckets, all right? I have a company called Sonic Trimmer, and we do trailers specifically. It's all we do, right? We don't do any pop songs. We don't do commercials. We just do trailers. Then I have just me, and this is the stuff that I do mostly for commercials. This is my regular bucket for commercials. And then I have the other part of me, which is not a company. So these 2 are my own, Michael Elsner. And this is all the songs that I write with people, any songwriters and anything that doesn't fit into the commercial category or the trailer category. Now, commercials are their own thing. Commercials are generally always going to be over 140 beats per minute. They're always going to be upbeat. They're going to be shorter pieces. And then trailers are more epic and bigger, and they're just written differently. They're written in 3 sections, right? So when you're writing a trailer, when you're writing a commercial. So everything that doesn't fit into those sits into this bucket. Now, I have one library that represents this company, which is a partnership that I have with my writing partner. I have another company, another library that represents every piece of music that I write that I feel is worthy of being a commercial. I send it to them, and they have a lot of success with those for me. And then every other track that I write, over the years, I had multiple libraries working with them, but now I have them all funneled under another company name, and that's all administered by a third library. So I have 3 different libraries or 3 different publishers, and when I'm writing a song, I can very quickly determine which bucket this is going into. If it's a pop song and I have a songwriter in here writing with me, it's sitting in this bucket. If I'm just writing by myself and it's an upbeat, fast, driving track, it's going to be a commercial. It's going to sit in this bucket. I know where the outlet is. And if it's a big, epic, symphonic piece that's obviously good for trailers, that's going to sit in this bucket. And there's a lot of freedom there to be able to, work those catalogs to those specific clients accordingly. At the same point, all of those particular libraries were specifically chosen because of the clients that they have and in the industries that they work with. So, for example, one of the company that represents, for example, Sonic Trimmer is a company called 5 Alarm Music. They're owned by Olay. Olay is, I think, the biggest independent publisher in the world. And I have people who will be like, "Hey, Michael, I'm sending my pop tracks to 5 Alarm," and I go, "That's okay. I didn't tell you to do that. I wouldn't send my music to them, my pop tracks to them, because they have a big catalog already that's full of that stuff." And they're a great company, by the way. They've been very successful for us, but they've been very successful for us in the library, in the trailer world, because in the trailer world we fill a niche or a niche in that library, right? So there are elements where you have to be pretty specific on how you're placing your music. But the wonderful thing about this is that you can find multiple libraries that can represent multiple styles of music that you write and represent them successfully. And you can have a tremendous amount of success by doing this. I equate it to something like the stock market, right? In the traditional music industry, if you're signed with a publisher, that's like putting all of your money into Apple. You can only be with one company at a time. And if that company doesn't promote your music or they don't do well for you, then you're kind of screwed, right? And it's kind of like a stock. If that stock goes down, you lose all your money, right? But in the licensing world, we have the opportunity to go, I want to work with this company with these songs, so I'm going to put some money into Netflix. I want to work with this company for these songs. I'm going to put some money into Starbucks, and I want to work with this company for these songs. So I'm going to put some money into Apple, right? And as they start doing well for you, you're like, this is great. But maybe one company starts to not do so well for a while. Who knows? Things change. So maybe this company is not doing so well anymore. Well, we always want to make sure that we understand our contracts. We want to always make sure that we do not sign any in perpetuity contracts, and that every contract that we have has a reversion clause. That just means that the rights can revert to you at a certain point. So maybe we have a 2-year deal with this company. In that case, if this company is not doing well anymore, then we can go, like Apple's not doing well anymore stock-wise or something, and we go, well, I want to cash out. I want to take my money out of Apple and I want to put my money into something else. That's what we can do in the licensing world. We can go, okay, this company's not doing so well anymore. Maybe they had a big turnover and they got a whole bunch of new employees and you don't know anyone in there anymore. You can take your money out. You can take your songs out, right? Your songs are your business assets. They're money, basically. You take your songs out and you go, okay, what's another company that would be really good at representing this particular style of music? Oh, that company over there. So now I'm going to put these songs with them. So we have a lot of freedom in the licensing side of the industry to be able to work our catalog and take our, have this team work these songs, have this team work these songs, and have this team work these songs. And that gives us a lot of opportunity to make consistent income and get placements. And if someone starts dropping the ball and they're not doing well anymore, just like a stock, you can pull your assets out and place them elsewhere. And that's not true in the traditional music industry path. When you sign a deal with a publisher, they own those songs in perpetuity.
And I love this stuff. This is blowing my mind right now. So it sounds like, to recap what you're saying, that sometimes it's valuable to not put all of your eggs in one basket. Not just investing just in Apple, but actually kind of spreading it out based on their expertise. And to take things back to the party analogy. Maybe you decide, do I really want to be the one who's going to all of these parties and going and mixing and mingling with all these people myself? Or do I want to get a publisher who essentially is someone that goes to the parties for you? And they have a team of people who are going to all these different parties and connecting with the different, people within those houses. And that gives you more freedom to not necessarily have to be the one on the front lines doing that and building those relationships when those relationships have maybe already been built to a certain extent.
Yeah, we can get ridiculous with the analogies, but a great analogy for the licensing industry is real estate. I think that the two industries are exact clones of each other. The only difference is in real estate, you're selling real property, a house, right? In licensing, you are granting permission to use, because you're not selling anything, you're granting permission to use or rent a piece of intellectual property. A song is intellectual property, right? But just going down this path for a second, if you sell your home for sale by owner, you're going to stick a sign out on your front lawn, but you're not going to have access to all the channels that realtors will. You know what I mean? Realtors have their friends and their network, and they get a new house coming on the market and be like, hey, Bob, I got a new 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house coming on the market in this part of town, and blah blah blah. Right? They can start getting that stuff out to all their channels, and you can sell your house quickly. And of course, they also have their finger on the pulse of the industry, and they know the real value of that house depending on the location and stuff like that. And that's like working with a library. You're working with a team of professionals who know the value of things. They got their finger on the pulse of the industry every day. They have their marketing channels and their people that they work with all the time. But I feel like when you're a musician and you're just going to go, I'm going to try and do this on my own and get it out to all these music supervisors. Okay. That's like selling your house for sale by owner. It might take you a long time. You could definitely sell your house, but are you going to get the optimal value for it? How much time are you going to spend trying to get it out there and promote it that you could actually be doing? You could actually be spending that time on something that's actually more valuable to you, which is actually building your catalog. And that's actually the first part of my process, is to continuously build your catalog, because your catalog, your music, your songs, they are the business assets. They're the assets that you're creating that are going to generate money for you. So for every hour that you spend sitting behind a computer trying to get your music out to supervisors, those are hours that you're losing creating new assets that could be generating income for you. And I think that, I'm just a big advocate for working with a team of professionals who know what they're doing, who have their marketing channels and their strategies and all that stuff in place, and letting them work your catalog. They are going to take a percentage of it, just like a realtor is going to take a percentage of your home sale. But that allows you to continuously keep getting back into your studio, doing what you're good at, writing music, and adding to your catalog. And the goal with licensing is not to land one big placement or two big placements. Those are called bragging rights, but you're going to blow through that money in no time. The goal with licensing should be to build a career out of it. And the way to build a career out of it is by consistent placements.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really fascinating. Like, this actually feels like it ripples into a lot of different industries, just because it's all about building a team and about leveraging your core area of expertise, and and having people that have established relationships it's kind of, I could like go off the deep end here, so I have to
No,
like
I love it. I love
pull
it.
it back. But like even the way like our brains work and the way that like electrical, signals are kind of like the dendrites kind of stick out, how there's kind of branches and they branch out. Um, it's, building a network, building a network of relationships, and building a team is something that's like a valuable life skill to do. And so it sounds like with publishers, really that's about, plugging into, uh, a community, plugging into an existing network
Yeah.
of expertise. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So Michael, again, I know we could really dive deep into this. When I'm talking with someone like you, who's a master at whatever field that they're in, I get this sense of like the level of depth, like the level of understanding is so deep. You probably aren't even aware of the, like, a lot of it just like makes sense to you. It's like, oh yeah, this is just how it is, and it just
Yeah.
like oozes out everything you're saying. So I appreciate you taking the time to, kind of come here and share some of those nuggets of what
Cool.
you've
Thanks,
learned.
man. Thank
So
you.
I know that for a lot of people who are watching this right now, they can see this is just kind of like the tip of the iceberg, and they really want to figure out, how do I dive a little bit deeper into this world, and how do I get started? And, and maybe they're creating like a little bit more of like structure and like a system. And I know that you offer those kinds of resources.
Yeah.
What would be a good place for people to learn more in terms of like, of what you offer, and in terms of like your like free training resources?
Yeah. So, I created a website called mastermusiclicensing.com. On there, you can go there and you can download a free book that I have. It's a PDF. You can read it in about 45 minutes. It outlines my exact 4-step process that I have, right? So I've just we talked really only about the first 2 steps, and we really only spent actually any time on step 2 of the process. But I have a 4-step process that I've used over the years, and it's just been very successful for me. As I've been teaching this to a lot of my friends. I've been teaching it to my friends since 2005, but I've been teaching it publicly, for the last 2 years, and it's awesome to see others who take the information and take action on it succeed. Because it does work. The process does work, because the process is all about showing up to that party with that big plate of the hot wings and the spare ribs and the and the potato, what am I trying to say, the vegetables and the fruits and vegetables, right? You're showing up and people are gonna be like, this is awesome, let's come, let them in. And it's all about bringing value to our end users. It's all about understanding our end users. And the end users in the licensing world aren't just music supervisors. There are people past music supervisors. You have music editors. You're also dealing with directors and producers and whatnot. So you have to keep that in mind. Re-recording mixers, they're the end of the chain. So there are a number of people further down the line who are going to be utilizing your music, and it's about delivering your music to them in a way that they can utilize it. And it doesn't change the process of creating the music, writing the music and stuff. That process starts literally from the time you're mixing. From the time you're mixing, I literally start there. From the time we mix, our process is going to be a little different than the process of when you mix a song and you send it out to, the CD duplicator and get your CDs packaged up and sent out to fans. It's a completely different process. So you can learn about that 4-step process there. You can download the book. And then I have blogs and videos and stuff like that. So you can go to the blog page, and pages and pages and pages of blogs and videos that I discuss a lot of that stuff. And I do have an online course that I release a couple times a year. And as we're speaking right now, I'm actually finishing up a sync ready challenge program that I'm super excited about. It's about getting your songs sync ready and ready to be sent out to supervisors and libraries and all the end users. I call them end users, editors and whatnot in the licensing world. So maybe by the time this video is up, that'll be done. But yeah, that's what I have, and I love sharing this. My favorite aspect of, I've been doing this for so long, licensing. So I definitely enjoy writing music and getting it out there. But I really, really, really love getting the updates from people who've gone through my program and sharing with me the placements they've gotten, and even video clips. I had a friend recently, where a guy I know recently sent me a video clip of his first placement on a TV show, and I just think that's the coolest thing. So I love that.
That's awesome. Cool. So for everyone that's watching this right now, to make it really easy, we'll just put a button below this video that has a
Sure.
link to get the book. And it
Yeah.
sounds like that book is a great starting point. It has like the four steps in the process for getting your song synced to music and getting your song synced to music,
Yeah.
getting your music synced
Video.
to TV, film,
Yeah.
film and commercials. So Michael, you're awesome, dude. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here and share, what you've been working on for the past 20 some years. So we really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks. We'll see you soon.